Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out Nuclear Revenge. Story 1. Karma generates interest over time. In the 3rd grade I was an awkward kid, had a mean drunk father, struggled to fit in and make friends, was bullied and shunned by other kids. One of my classmates, let's call him Derek, who regularly partook in bullying me, showed me kindness one day. Being deprived of kindness or attention so regularly, I was putty in his hands. He hanged out with me during recess when I was usually alone, we laughed and talked about girls we like, he even apologized for being an asshole to me. The reason he was nice to me was because I had brought a very popular, expensive Batman action figure to school with me to pass the time since I was alone mostly. I saved allowance and mowed lawns for 2 months to buy that toy. Everyone wanted one. By the end of the day he asked me if he could lend the action figure, and like the naive, socially inept kid I trusted him with it. The deal was to return it the following morning. I went home so happy, completely fooled, I never suspected a thing. The following day he completely ignored me. When I tried to talk to him he acted like I was crazy. When I asked him to return the action figure he simply said, "You never gave me any Batman. Maybe you imagined it," and when I persisted he threatened to beat my ass. When I complained to my teacher I was told that it was my own fault for bringing toys to school. I was afraid they would involve my father, so I dropped it. I couldn't let my father know or I would be called a pussy and have my ass beat and punished for the next 2 weeks. What's worse is Derek told all the girls that I confided to him about fancying that I lusted after them and that I wanked to them. I was a social outcast before that, but at least I was tolerated, but after his smear campaign with the girls I was a leper. People wouldn't even look me in the eyes, not even the teachers. Kids started throwing stones at me, sabotaged and vandalized my property. It was hell. I did nothing about it but cry. I was just a weak-willed kid after all, but to this day I wish I'd bit someone's ear off or something, anything in retaliation. After a while the bullying died down. I focused on my studies and started getting good grades. Derek started talking to me again, but I ignored him completely. Sometimes he would repeat, "Why are you being such a baby? You didn't give me anything, you imagined it." By the end of the year we moved houses and I transferred to another school not far away. Things were much better there. I finally had friends and I was not as naive anymore, so I was not as easily targeted. But I was still mostly me and still got picked on now and then. Over the years I became somewhat of a delinquent, and in high school I got into regular fights. I may have been overcompensating for the lack of a spine I had in my younger years. I bartended in nightclubs, hotels, and cruise liners in my early 20s. This helped me a lot to be more socially adept and to understand social dynamics and human nature. I finished trade school and qualified as an electrician and later as a plumber. I know, water and electricity, but believe it or not, I thought it was ingenuous at the time. I started my own business, developed a reputation for excellent workmanship in my local area and did well for myself. When I was 29, I'm 36 now, I received a call out at 2 in the morning for a flooding emergency at a local residence. When I got there the place was a mess, water was jetting out of a burst pipe and electrical equipment was shorted. It was highly dangerous. The living room floor was caved in due to a sinkhole. I was met by the wife, let's call her Jane, hysterical and beside herself. She somehow thought that she was responsible, which I found odd. I assured her that it couldn't possibly be her fault. He arrived not 5 minutes later. His demeanor was irate. He didn't greet or shake my hand when I offered. I recognized him immediately, Derek from all those years ago. He demanded to know why I have not begun fixing the issue yet. I was professional, told him what I'd told the wife in terms of costs, but I hid the written quote in my vehicle. I told him who I was and acted happy to see him, assured him that he was in good hands. After a while of arguing with his wife he seemed to calm down and joked around with me. I knew I had fooled him. We talked about our careers, kids, our school days. I gave him tips and fake recommendations. We got along great. His trust was easy to gain. He must have thought of me as a complete sucker. I assured him that he was in good hands and this would be fixed in no time. I was careful not to start any actual work on the property. Doing the smallest thing would make me responsible for all of it. Derek left after an hour or so and his wife stayed behind. I started my revenge. When I was doing my assessment, I noticed that most of the building did not comply with city regulation and did not adhere to the registered and approved plans. There were multiple safety hazards and all plumbing and electrical work were completed by unqualified and uncertified people in an attempt to save money. Also, the pipe in question had been leaking for a few weeks at least, getting worse by the day and finally causing disaster, which means their water bill would be astronomical at the end of the month unless a qualified plumber endorses a rebate with the municipality. I called my contact at the city, let's call him Donovan, and notified him of all the regulatory violations, safety hazards and non-city compliant installations on the property. I also told him of the possible water bill. He promised to be there the next day. I immediately started photographing and documenting. The following morning my contact was there at 10, he had a field day. He informed Derek's wife of the calamity that was to come. They would be forced to tear down all the building additions, remove all the uncertified plumbing and wiring installations, have the plans reapproved, and start from scratch, which is an estimated loss of approximately $950,000. Derek was there in minutes, he was livid. He quickly threatened legal action, but Donovan simply told him that he had more than enough photograph evidence to have the property declared invalid within a week if Derek did not comply in writing. Donovan reminded Derek that he does this for a living and that the city has more legal resources to waste money on. I left Derek an invoice for my time just to smear salt in the wood and took my leave. Later he called me and called me every name under the sun. I remained silent and he hung up. He went on a Facebook rant about me, which was a bad idea. All of the community stood up for me and it started storytelling competition where all kinds of people revealed stories of savory things Derek did to them in the past. Apparently Derek has always been an asshole, he never changed. One day he called me and asked to meet. He sounded defeated and depressed, so I decided to meet and see what's up. I met him at a local busy convenience store. I know better than to take Derek the Weasel at face value, so noticed quickly when he laid his phone screen down on the table. I knew he may be recording the conversation. He apologized for his behavior, which surprised me, and told me that this whole dilemma has all but bankrupted him. He told me he took out a loan for the building additions and cut corners to save money, that everyone does it. He showed me the water bill, which was nearly $80,000, a problem easily erased with a qualified plumber's signature and endorsement. I refused. He got irate again. Then he asked me, "Why did you do this to me? I know I was a dick to you when we were kids, but I don't deserve to have my and my wife's life ruined because of mistakes I made when I was a kid. What kind of person are you? You told me I was in good hands, I trusted you, you assured me you would help me, then you stabbed me in the back. You quoted me only a few hundred and told me not to worry." I replied, "I said no such thing. Derek, stop lying, you told me that it would cost a few hundred, maybe less. I heard you say it, you promised to help me, gave me recommendations. Why are you doing this to me?" "Seneca, Derek, you must have imagined it." I looked him in the eye. He knew exactly why I said that, the same thing he told me almost 20 years ago. I repeated just to drive it home. "Seneca, you're being a baby, I never quoted you for anything, you imagined it." He knew I was destroying him financially because of a Batman action figure he stole from me 20 years ago. I could see it in his eyes, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. His expression was a mixture of astonishment and disgust. I looked him dead in the eyes for a few seconds for effect, then got up and left. I slept like a baby that night, and had a goofy smile all week after. He tried calling a few times but sent him a text stating that further harassment will be met with legal action. "Derek, you know what your real name is, and what mine is. If in future you read this and realize how I screwed you over, remember how costly that little Batman action figure was to you after years of accumulated interest in karma. The look of despair on your face when you realize why you are ruined was delicious." I cackled maniacally on the drive home from that convenience store. "It was time for you to pay the piper. And if you think this will help you legally, go ahead and try, it won't, so don't waste your time. Or rather do, waste as much time and money. I welcome being even more of a financial inconvenience to your life. Fuck you, Derek. Edit, if the monetary amounts confuse you, I don't live in the USA. Divide the amounts by 8 and you have a rough estimate of the exchange rate. Story 2. 2 for the price of 1. So I was laid off. No big deal, right? It happens. But in this instance, it's a little different. I was working at a tech startup and was one of the early employees. I was one of the key people to develop their technology, which significantly helped enable them to raise tens of millions of dollars. I was told early on that they would basically take care of me as the company grew. Well, for a time at least, the company grew leaps and bounds. Again, much in part to the excellent tech I helped develop. Yet, the company had little concern for little ol me. Meanwhile, they brought on a bevy of new managers and high-level people, and yet my career was basically stagnant while I was there. But then, things started to slow down due to economic conditions. There had been a couple of layoffs, and I figured it was probably time to leave the sinking ship. So I lined up a new position at another company. I then went into my manager and told him that it seemed like more layoffs were imminent and that I had secured a job offer at another company. I asked him if it would be a good idea if I should take it, and he said that he would let me know. A couple of days later, after he had discussed things with the CEO, they said I was okay and not to take the other position. I turned down the other position, because I had invested so much of myself into this company, even having sold my house and moved hundreds of miles to work at this company, and I still had a lot of stock options that I was hoping would be worth something someday. Literally a couple of weeks later, guess what? Yep, they laid me off. Now that other position was no longer available, and because this was at the height of the recession, I was out of work for 4 months until I found another position. I could have even lost my house during this time, and I had to sell some cool stuff to keep paying the bills. The new position I finally found was much further from home and was a financial hardship. I would have been better off if they had just been honest with me and told me to take the offer I had in hand previously. But honesty wasn't ever their policy. Anyhow, before I was involuntarily separated from the company, I was working with a Fortune 500 company that was trying to partner with us on some technology. After leaving, I got wind that they were going to invest $15 million in the company. That bothered me for several reasons, mostly because most of us were pretty sure that the crooked CEO was pilfering the company for personal gain. I'm thinking that this guy shouldn't be rewarded for his atrocious management of the company, and honestly, I didn't think that it would be a wise investment for this large company. I contacted my inside guy at the Fortune 500 and told him some of my concerns about the stewardship of the money at the startup and that it wasn't really a wise investment. This company was looking for a distribution deal for our technology, so I told them the best use of their money would be to make a deal to exchange a large blanket purchase order for stock. This way, the startup company would still get a big chunk of investment money coming in, but they would have to perform for it. It's the difference between giving a kid an allowance for no reason at all, or giving a kid an allowance based on if they did their chores or not. I didn't necessarily want the investors to walk away from a partnership, because I had many friends still at the company and didn't want to see them out in the cold. So my thought was that this type of a deal would keep the company afloat while minimizing the potential for pilfering and better protecting the investment. All in all, if structured right, it could be a win-slash-win, and make it much more difficult for the crooked CEO and his cronies to loot the company. I additionally told them that I wouldn't recommend investing a penny unless they got a seat on the board of directors. That way, they would have first-hand knowledge of some of the shenanigans going on behind the scenes with their money. That was about it. Now they were armed with some additional information and tactics to perhaps better protect their investment as well as help ensure that if they did invest, everything would be above board. Some time later, I heard that the CEO pulled the entire company into the conference room and chewed them a new one. He was furious, because the investor had somewhat done what I had suggested. They had dropped their investment from $15 million to $5 million and had come up with some sort of blanket order or something along those lines. I'm not quite sure, but in essence it meant a $10 million loss in the mind of the CEO. He's a bit of a fat slob, so it's quite unfortunate that he didn't just have a heart attack right then and there. No surprising, in the process the investor was denied the board seat, and one can only guess why, dirty secrets and all. In fact, one of the board members that the CEO did bring on board had already done time for defrauding his clients. A marriage made in heaven, I guess. So, not necessarily meant as revenge, but sweet nonetheless, the company basically lost $10 million because of what they did to me. They were all but expecting this money. Had they not laid me off, I probably wouldn't have even thought about putting the investors' interests above that of the corrupt company. In the end, surprising to no one, the investor eventually got majorly screwed by the unscrupulous startup company anyways. The two companies had some disagreements about their distribution agreement and the investor ended up having to pay a major settlement to the startup company after a contentious mediation. But, never fear, don't screw with a Fortune 500. As the startup company was starting to gasp its last breath, they were working on a promising deal with another company they had identified as a major potential customer, one that would put them back on the track to financial success and further line the CEO's dirty pockets. Well, the Fortune 500 company got wind of the deal, bought the other company, and then shut down the deal. That's ninja-level revenge. So in the end, 2 nuclear revenges for the price of 1. I couldn't have been happier to hear about the karmic justice once again hitting the company. Now the company is all but dead. All physical assets went to auction. The CEO is milking the last few dollars out of the account, but because our SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, is all but worthless, he'll start another venture and the cycle will repeat itself. The sad thing is that the CEO, in my humble opinion, makes Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of their ANOS, look like Mother Teresa. I pray that one day they do a Netflix docuseries exposing all that went on at this mess of a company. I can guarantee you, it will be quite a hit. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.